So I'll have to double check that. But during that time, available for questions in as much or as little detail as you need.
Do you know what they're doing for spring semester? Is it gonna be just like right now, or?
I don't know. My suspicion is that we're gonna start out at home, but I don't know. I am not part of those conversations. Because the reason why we're not meeting after Thanksgiving is assume that more people, we're gonna get a spike as people are meeting with family.
Right.
And I can't imagine that Christmas is gonna be any better. Yeah.
There is no quiz for this chapter?
No. In the past, I've done optional quizzes for it, but that never worked out well. So I guess if you want a quiz, I could give it to you, but anyone who did the optional quiz did worse on it than their quiz average. Other questions?
So we're not gonna meet every Monday, Wednesday for class after Thanksgiving. It'll be videos and you'll be available for questions.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, still available during the lab time, even though we are not formally gonna do a lab.
Okay, so no labs, basically.
Yeah, for the one Friday. Go back to my calendar here.
Yeah, is it just one? Is it really?
So we've got this Friday the 20th, 27th is Thanksgiving, is Black Friday. The following Friday is the 4th. Officially, we would have a lab then, and then the Wednesday after that, that's it. So there's just one lab that. Now what I've done in the past the past, like I've been doing it for a long time, since March. The at-home labs is I did the lab, filmed everything, and then you're pulling data from it. Yeah, there's just too much stuff going on right now. I don't think I could do it properly. But if you want a lab for December 4th, I can do it.
Optional, I know, extra credit.
Oh, yeah. Extra credit usually comes across, when I see the students work for the extra credit stuff that I've done in the past, it's usually, well, you know, it doesn't hurt me to do this, but I don't really have to put a lot of energy into it. And so I just end up reading stuff and going, why'd you bother? That's been my experience. All right, so let's start on 18? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, chapter 19. Waves. All right, let's start out this bit with something everyone is excited by, vocabulary. Woo! Period. Use a capital T, this is traditional for the word period. T is in time, and it is the time to do one cycle of repetitive motion. And while you're mulling that over, let me go grab a notebook. Guess that's in essence what these next couple chapters are. It's just repetitive motion. All right, so the next bit, frequency. The symbol I use is sort of the same symbol I use for friction, because ultimately, again, we have 100 characters and some will have to be repeated. Frequency, how often repetitive motion happens. Repetitive motion happens. Or the number of cycles per unit time. So period is the time per a cycle, and frequency is the cycles per time. Notice one is just the flip of the other. And this is time per cycle, and this is cycle per time. So the period is just the reciprocal of the frequency, or frequency is the reciprocal of the period. In terms of SI units, the units of period, based upon our definition here, what would be the units?
Second?
Yeah, there we go. It's a time. Seconds. The SI units of frequency.
Watts?
No.
No. Hertz?
Yeah, it's hertz, or since it's the reciprocal of time, it's cycles per second, or hertz. Cycles per second. So up here for period, you could write seconds per cycle. That's also legitimate. Seconds is traditionally what people write, but there's an implied seconds per cycle. And a cycle is just got repetitive motion. Cycle is just one of those bits of motion. Wavelength. Now we get into the Greek letters. The symbol for wavelength traditionally is the lambda. And there is a B in lambda. How far a wave travels in one period. And again, when I say how far, I'm talking about a distance here, the distance. The distance a wave travels in one period. So I create a wave, and the wave is going to travel at a certain speed. It's going to go at a certain distance before I start the next cycle. The SI unit of wavelength would be what?
Kilometers?
Close. That would be a legitimate unit for it, but officially SI would just be meters. All right, so speed. What's the formula for speed? Flashback to chapter 3.
Distance over time?
Yes. So it's some distance over time. So if I have a wave that's being produced, then the distance that it travels is lambda in the time t, capital T. So the distance, if we look at the distance traveled for a single cycle, a single wave, it travels the wavelength in whatever the period is. So that's lambda times 1 over the period, which is lambda times the frequency. Or sometimes frequency times lambda. I'd probably write it that way more often, doesn't matter mathematically. So we have the speed of a wave is equal to the frequency times the wavelength. And this gets into one of the most unfortunate things in symbolism or shorthand notation in physics. Using F for frequency is what a lot of textbooks do, but not all of them. And so if you're looking at another resource, they might not be using F. Unfortunately, the more advanced textbooks, or some places, instead of using F, will use the Greek letter nu. The Greek letter nu looks like this. So that equation down there would be written as V is equal to nu times the wavelength. Now, depending upon the font that the textbook or the website is using, instead it might look like that. Because different fonts write them slightly differently. And so, which one is the V and which one is the nu? What I have to do when I'm faced with this is I have to find this equation here. I have to find this equation, and then that tells me which one's the V and which one is the nu. So in this font right here, V is straight. In this font right here, the nu is straight. It is incredibly confusing. My first semester here, one of the nanotech students walked down to my office and said, I can't figure out why they have 2 different V's in this equation. I said, yeah, one of them's not a V. So I hope you understand why I used F instead. 1, it makes more sense, and 2, it eliminates the whole nu V hassle. But I bring that up just in case you run across it. You'll go, oh, wait a second, that's what he was talking about. One other one before I let you go. Amplitude. Generically, a capital A, although it can change depending upon the problem. And it's the value of peak to median, or median to trough. Because these things oscillate back and forth. You have high points and you have low points. I can't be more specific than that without a specific problem. Because, bless you, the SI units for amplitude are problem dependent. If you're talking about sound, then the amplitude could be in meters per, could be in pascals, or it could be in decibels. If you're talking about a slinky that is bobbing up and down, then probably in meters. So it really depends upon the problem that you're working on. So that's just basically an introduction. Wednesday we'll get into enough detail so that you'll be able to handle Friday's lab. And we will take advantage of no one in the hallway.